Number 5. The Sword of Daneslef. The Sword of Daneslef, and hey, there's a good chance I'm pronouncing that wrong, so let me know, is among the most famous of weapons in Nordic myths, a legendary cursed sword of yore. Daneslef was the blade of King Hogni, who was a noble king in ancient Viking stories. The Daneslef sword was handcrafted by the dwarf Dane, who is said to be among the most skilled craftsmen in all of the realms. The name of the sword literally translates to Dane's legacy. However, the sword had been imbued with a dark, powerful magic energy. Whenever the mighty Daneslef was drawn, it could not be sheathed until blood had coated its blade. Someone had to die to feed the thirst of blood that quelled inside the tempered steel. Not just that too, but this cursed sword must have had like a very specific hunger pang for neck blood, as the sword had to behead an enemy. Sounds like an extremely high maintenance cursed sword. Surely all blood tastes the same, right? To a sword? I don't know, maybe I'm being dismissive. The sword features prominently in the story of Prose Edda, an ancient Nordic textbook thought to date back from the 12th century, which told the story of King Hogni and his beautiful daughter Hild, while he warred in the eternal battle of the kings. According to this old story, Hogni came to meet other kings across the land, and brought his daughter to introduce them. However, a jealous rival king seized his daughter and stole her away. Hogni gathered as many of his most fearsome warriors as he could to reclaim her, and sailed west in pursuit of his daughter. He found her on an island, yet her captor had attempted to persuade Hogni into making peace with him. But Hogni told him it was too late to end that. I mean, makes sense, you stole my daughter, bro. But the Daneslef had been drawn, and it couldn't be sheathed until he'd been beheaded. The legend then goes on to state that the two men fought for 143 years. But I'm hoping they took like 2 15-minute breaks a day at least. And my ghouls and goblins, if you love the scares we put out for you, the nicest way to show thanks is to toss a little like and subscribe our way. If you're already subscribed, you're the coolest. If you're not, well, I still like you lots, but you could really win me over with a like and subscribe. Just saying, if you wanted to get on my good side. Number 4. Runes of Power. To the Vikings, runes and runic magic were a cornerstone of their culture. Runes were their language, after all, their written language. The old poem Havamal explains that Odin, the Allfather, discovered the runes when he hung himself from the world tree, Yggdrasil, in order to attain enlightenment. As he hung on the tree, blowing for 9 nights and 9 days, he found himself slowly fading away, ready to be taken away to hell, when as he was about to die, he found the runes, took them, and earned his life, and bestowed them to humanity. Carving a rune into an object imbued it with a great deal of power. With the right inscriptions and the aid of a powerful seeress or sorceress, you could predict the future, protect yourself, or your family from misfortune. You could even imbue a blade with powerful energy. Skyrim got that right exactly. As well, runes were said to be the key to activating conjurations, curses, and spells, but as well, runic inspirations were found to bless just everyday things. Oftentimes, they told stories within them too. Runestones were also used in Viking culture as landmarks, and the inscriptions they bore contained powerful magic within them. Take the Glavendrup stone, which contains a powerful warning to anyone who dares to move it. Listen to what it says. Ragnhildr placed this stone in memory of Ali the Pale, priest of the sanctuary, honorable thane of the retinue. Ali's sons made the monument in memory of their father, and his wife in memory of her husband, and Soti carved these runes in memory of his lord. Thor, hallow these runes. A warlock be he who damages this stone, drags it in memory of another. So this runestone's got a little curse put in place to make sure no one disturbs the slumber of Ali the Pale. Perhaps one of the most famous runestones in the world is the Björktorp runestone in Sweden. A mysterious runestone whose purpose is not fully known, but bears another frightening inscription. Listen to this one, and I gotta put a bit of a voice on for this one, you'll understand. I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power. Incessantly plagued by maleficence, doomed to insidious death is he who breaks this monument. Do forgive me, but can you imagine me just reading that normal? Would not have worked. So we might not know what the Björktorp runestone is for, but we can say with certainty no one is willing to move it to find out what might be built on top of it, just in case runic magic is real and they don't want to experiment with dooming themselves to an insidious death plagued by malfeasance. That sounds terrible. Number 3, the Nidaros Cathedral. The Nidaros Cathedral is a popular tourist hotspot in Norway. Renowned for its beautiful architecture, it's a stunning monument to Norway's very rich history, and it's also quite known as one of the more haunted buildings in the entire country. It's located in the city center of Trondheim, named after the Trondheim Nidaros, which was the capital of Norway during the era of Vikings. In the early days, it was a humble, simple wooden chapel built to serve as the tomb of Saint Olaf, a Viking king king who helped introduce Christianity to Viking culture and would be remembered as the patron saint of Norway. It was the traditional location for the consecration of new kings of Norway. Now if you're looking at this and you think, wow, what a building, that's because it took 230 years to build it, so I would hope it looks great. From the years 1070 to 1300, it was worked on round the clock. Now let's get into the most important part, and the only part we even care about this building is the ghost. I just spent so much time talking about architectural history when we could be talking about a ghost. Norway's most famous ghost is known as the monk, and he's an apparition that manifests as a medieval monk with a bloody gash along its throat, dripping onto the floor. The monk's first sighting was in 1924, and since then has become a bit of a staple of the cathedral, with countless sightings and tourists reporting hearing, seeing, or feeling the monk around the cathedral. The first sighting was from a bishop's wife during service, and she claims that she saw the monk standing behind the congregation with bright glowing blue eyes. She said his face was sharp and glowing, and when he raised his hand that blood started to pour from his throat. The priest who was tending to the service at the time claims that while he was speaking, he felt an unspeakable pain in his throat, as if something was lodged in it. Ugh. Number 2. Viking graves. Now the Vikings were a very superstitious people. Ghosts were a very common belief and possible threat in medieval Norway. Your soul could go just about all over. You might end up in Valhalla, the realm of Odin, where you can drink and fight to your heart's content for eternity. Or you could end up in Folkvanger, Freya's realm, a lush, bountiful field that sprawled forever. Or you could end up in Helheim, which was just a terrible, cold, dismal place. Imagine spending your entire life in freezing Scandinavia, dying, and then waking up in a different freezing afterlife. I would be so upset. Of course, if you didn't qualify for any of these afterlife options, you could always end up with your soul trapped on the earth and reanimated as a ghost or a corpse zombie monster called a draugr, which anyone who spent too much time inside of any of Skyrim's caves can tell you are a real nuisance. So Vikings had to come up with all sorts of ways to make sure that nobody came back to cause any problems for the village. No doubt you've heard of Viking funerary ships or their pyres, where their dead were sent off into the water in a longboat with possessions that might befit them in the afterlife, and then lit ablaze with an arrow. But oftentimes, that was more for higher caste members of society. Other burials were traditional, but the body was kept in the home for a few days to prepare. The Vikings took all sorts of fun precautions to make sure they wouldn't have a draugr on their hands. The head was wrapped in bandages. Oftentimes the feet would be bound or sewn together, or even needles would be placed into the feet to make sure just in case they came back to life they wouldn't be able to walk. Corpses were brought into houses feet first because they believed the spirit of the person would not be able to see where they were being taken for burial and thus unable to find their way back home. If they had the time too, Vikings would build something really fun called a corpse door, an opening they built into a home which was bricked up, and when the burial was ready would be smashed through and the dead would be carried through this feet first. The belief was that the reanimated could only enter their home from the way they had left, so if there was no corpse door anymore, the draugr wouldn't be able to get in and it would just sort of paw at the door like a sad cat. Honestly, the logic is there. This one makes complete sense to me. And number 1, the Dorset grave. The Dorset mass grave is one of the scariest and confusing archaeological discoveries ever discovered. Let me ask you, what's more fun than a barrel of monkeys? You might be thinking a barrel of Vikings? No, I'm thinking about a mass grave full of headless Viking bodies. No? Okay, well you and I find different things very fun, I suppose. Way back, all the way back in 2008, a group of archaeologists were on a fairly routine digging operation in Dorset, a quaint little seaside town in England. They were supervising a digging operation to improve local roads and were on set to see if there was anything of note to find. You know, maybe an old coin or an arrowhead. And for the first few days of the job, nothing noteworthy was really coming up until they came across the mass pile of 54 entangled Viking corpses, all missing their heads. I guess that was kind of noteworthy. If it was just a bunch of headless Viking bodies, that would be one thing, but the mass grave was just riddled in confusing details. Their skulls were missing, but as well, their rib cages, arm, and leg bones were all scattered around, surrounded by discarded teeth. There were no clothes or weaponry to be found at all. So what in Odin's name happened here, because absolutely nothing I can imagine is pleasant. My first thought is that this was some sort of insane Event Horizon-esque scenario where a bunch of Vikings opened up a portal portal to hell and had a blood party. The teeth found around the grave had all been filed down neatly as if a craftsman had done it. Now it goes without saying that, Viking dental surgery was not going to be a painless process, meaning this had to be excruciating, suggesting it was either done by a very careful tormentor or it was done to themselves to intimidate opponents by showing how gritty and fierce they are. Could not tell you which one is better. Now, as good as my theory about a bunch of Vikings opening up a Hellraiser scenario or something is, archaeologists had some different ideas. They theorized that looking at the wounds on the ribs and the torso, that they were very surgical blows, which isn't really what you'd expect from a rabid Viking brawl. The archaeologists thought that these men were either offered up as part of a horrifying sadistic ritual, or it was a big time mass sentencing where everybody was rounded up and sentenced to death. Explains too where all the weapons and gear had gone, as these men had been brought here and then left there for a very, very long time. Anyone else feel like that also kind of sounds like it might be the world's most terrifying puzzle to try and put together, trying to figure out where all those bones go? Maybe just me? Maybe I've been working on this channel too long and my sense of humor has been changed permanently.
Coming in at number 5 we have Mummy. Many years ago the Princess of Amun-Ra was laid to rest in an ornate wooden coffin and buried deep in the vault on the banks of the Nile. Years later in the 1890s, 4 rich young Englishmen visited the excavation site. They were invited to buy the mummy case containing the remains of the princess. They took the coffin back to their hotel ready to transport it onward. A few hours into the night he was seen walking out into the desert. He was never seen again. The next day one of the 3 remaining men was accidentally shot. He lost his arm but survived the incident. The third man lost his entire life savings and the bank holding his money was destroyed. The final man suffered a severe illness, lost his job and was forced to live on the streets. Within the first 6 months the 4 men had been destroyed by the curse. The coffin was then shipped to England where it was bought by a London businessman. The coffin continued to torment and curse anyone who owned it. Many people passed away due to being associated with the relic. After the coffin gained a lot of attention, a hard-headed American archaeologist purchased and paid a great price to have it shipped to New York. He dismissed everything that had happened preceding this as being quirks of circumstance or many coincidences. The man flew to London to escort his great treasure to New York aboard the brand new White Star liner on its maiden voyage. Of course, as we know, on April 15th, 1912, the Titanic sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic, taking with it the ancient Amun-Ra's princess. When the Titanic was found and the relics on board recovered, only the lid of the coffin was recovered. It now sits on display behind protective glass at the British Museum. Some people have still commented about paranormal activity near the lid, but it seems the loss of the contents it held has diminished its power. Coming in at number 4 we have the Great Omar. The company Sangorski and Sutcliffe are known for their practice of binding books, something that was popular in the Middle Ages, but they resurrected the craft. Their books were bound in expensive materials with intricate designs. The company was founded in 1901 and grew in popularity quickly. They used real gold, jewels and precious stones. They had a high-class clientele. Their most famous work was the Great Omar. When this piece was commissioned, they were told the cost was not to be considered. They made this their greatest piece, outdoing all of their previous efforts. They worked for 2.5 years to create the most beautiful binding with thousands of jewels. Although it was beautiful, it is believed it had an ancient curse attached to it, that at some point during its creation a great evil attached itself to the piece. When it was finished in 1911 it was listed for sale. It sold for £1,000, which would be worth around $120,000 today. It was shipped to New York but returned by the buyers when they refused to pay the custom fee. When it was returned to England they relisted and sold the book again for half of the initial price. It was once again sold to an American buyer. They had the book scheduled to ship but the transport left without the book on board. They scrambled to find the next available way to get the book to the buyer. It was placed aboard the luxury liner, the Titanic. The book was never recovered from the wreckage of the Titanic. This was only the beginning of the misfortune for the book's creators. Just a few weeks later, Sangorski drowned trying to save a drowning woman. They did recreate the book, but once again it was destroyed during the London bombings of World War II. Coming in at number 3 we have Love Letter. Many things were recovered from the Titanic that told the story of the people on board and the events leading up to the devastating collision. Richard Geddes, one of the ship's stewards, had left his wife behind in England to work on the ship. Many of the stewards wrote letters to their family while at sea. Unfortunately, Richard was one of the unlucky 1,500 passengers left on the ship when it sank to the bottom of the ocean. Most of the letters are your typical letters to loved ones, but this one contained details of what others now see as a bad omen. Something happened within the first days of the voyage that may have indicated that the trip was doomed from the very start. The letter details a close call collision the Titanic had with a smaller ship, the SS City of New York. The two vessels came within a couple of feet of one another as the Titanic left the docks. The suction from the propellers of the Titanic caused the City of New York's ropes to snap. This released the boat, causing a new collision that the captain avoided. Some say if they had collided, maybe it would have saved their lives. The delay might have made them days or even hours late when crossing the iceberg, and even a few seconds difference can change everything. The rest of the letter is saddening to read, with the seaman telling his wife that she did not need to worry, he was safe and would be home soon. He explained the Titanic felt like a sturdy ship and there would be no issues going forward. Yikes. Well, it was cursed from the beginning when they called it the unsinkable ship. Coming in at number 2, we have the pocket watch. A pocket watch that had belonged to John Chapman was recovered from the wreckage. He was traveling with his wife Sarah. It might seem like an old rusty watch that had been lying at the bottom of the ocean, but there was something strange about it that no one had been able to figure out since it was found. The story of John and his wife was a tragic one. They had been at a party with some of the first class guests on the night the ship sank. At some point in the night they got separated when the ship hit the iceberg. His wife Sarah was with the other wives from the party and they got taken to one of the lifeboats. Sarah soon realized that she would have to go alone, that John would not find her here, and even if he did, he may not be allowed to enter the boat. She made the decision and told the other women, if John can't go, I won't go either. She got off the boat to find her husband. It is not known if she ever did find him before the boat sank. John's body was recovered, but Sarah was never found. It's believed that he had his watch on him during the time that the ship sank, but the watch froze in time. It is still frozen to this day. The watch stopped ticking the moment the iceberg hit the ship. The curious thing about this is that the first impact was not the worst. The shock should not have been so large as to disrupt something as small as a pocket watch. Many have found this to be interesting. Why did the time stop at that moment? This is not the only curious thing about the watch. Since it was bought at an auction, the owner had reported some paranormal activity. They have claimed to have heard a voice coming from within their walls. It's unclear to them what it says, but it sounds distressful. Could it be the spirit of John looking for his lost love Sarah? And finally, in at number 1, we have the heart of the ocean. We all know the story of the heart of the ocean from the film, but the real story is much different. It still tells the story of romance and tragedy. Some believe that the real necklace was cursed and may have been the cause for the tragic events of the sinking ship. The story starts with Kate, who might have been the inspiration for the character Rose in the blockbuster film. Kate was having an affair with a married man named Henry Morley. Henry wanted to be with Kate, but it would not have been wise to leave his wife and live with Kate in their current home. He decided that they would run away together. He decided that they would start a new life under new names. They decided to secretly board the Titanic under fake names and begin their new lives. The pair met when she began working in a sweet shop. It was said he secretly made plans to leave with his lover and even sold a couple of his stores. He kept his running away a secret from everyone except his brother, who drove them to the boat. In the months running up to them sailing, he had a necklace commissioned to give Kate after they boarded the ship. It is rumored that his wife may have found out about the plan, keeping it to herself but somehow cursing the couple. Some believe it was her anger that cursed the necklace so that their new life would never be. They boarded the ship and he gifted Kate the necklace. They looked forward to starting their new life together. When the boat began to sink, Kate was put into a lifeboat along with the other women and children. Henry did not want her to go. He clung to her, but the sailors threw her in the boat. Henry's body was never recovered. Kate spent a few months in New York after she was rescued. She was planning to start her new life under the names he had chosen. It was when she realized that she was pregnant that she felt the need to go home. Kate could never tell her child about her father Henry as she found it too painful. She was later admitted to an asylum, unable to deal with the event and trauma of the Titanic. Many believe the heart of the ocean is responsible for destroying not only the lives of these lovers but of everyone who was on board the Titanic.
Number 5 on this list is the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous jewels in the history of the world. Its exceptional size and beauty are practically unparalleled. It is 45.52 carats and gives off a beautiful blue hue when it is hit by the light, truly a marvel from the world. This diamond is said to be worth anywhere from 200 to 350 million American dollars. To put that in perspective, if you had this diamond, you could buy your own Hawaiian private island in exchange for it. The earliest records of the diamond go all the way back to 1666 when a French gem merchant purchased it. Since then, it has changed hands many times, ending up in the hands of some royalty and eventually making its way to the National Museum Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., where it resides today. This diamond may be the most beautiful stone on the entire planet, but one should be careful with it because it's said to hold a curse. Over the years that this diamond has been in circulation, many tragedies have befallen the owners of this stone. An article written by Christy Puchko writes, "Some believe it is cursed, with a whole mythology claiming that great misfortune and misery will befall any who dares to wear the 45.52 carat diamond. Rumored victims of the diamond have suffered disgrace, divorce, suicide, imprisonment, torture, financial ruin, lynching, or decapitation. One was even said to have been ripped apart by dogs and another by a French mob. If these stories are true, then it's no wonder why the legend of a curse has circulated around this diamond. So with all that being said, I want to ask you guys, if somebody offered you this diamond, do you take the risk? On one hand, you could be the owner and the bearer of potentially the most sought after rock on the planet, but on the other hand, you might just be a very expensive dog treat. Let me know what you got down below, diamond or no diamond? Number 4 on this list is Tut's tomb. Now this tomb is the most famous, however this entry could be generalized to any tomb of a pharaoh that is disturbed. If a pharaoh's tomb is disturbed, then you will have activated the pharaoh's curse, and this will befall anyone who enters and disturbs the sleep of these mummified Egyptian royalty. For a long time, hieroglyphs couldn't be deciphered, but in the early 19th century this changed and we were able to read them. On the pyramids of Giza, there is a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and the snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in the water and the scorpion on land." This acts as a pretty clear-cut warning to stay away and not disturb anyone that's inside. I should also note that this rule applies to anyone. We're talking archaeologists, thieves, literally anyone who enters. Your motives for entering don't matter, it's only that you are there. Over the years, this curse has reared its ugly head time and time again. When they first opened the tomb of King Tut, there is a famous story of how Howard Carter, the leader of the team operating the excavation, had a canary, and when it entered the tomb, died at the hands of a cobra. 2 weeks later, the person who financed the whole operation, Lord Carnarvon, was bit by a mosquito and died due to a horrible infection. These are two of the most famous examples, but for centuries, bad luck, sudden illness, and death have been tied to these ancient tombs. Another one of the pharaoh's tombs warns, "They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." I'd say that that's just about as clear-cut as curses come these days. Number 3 on this list is James Dean's Little Bastard. Now I'm certainly stretching the definition of ancient history on this one because this story actually takes place in the 50s, but with the amount of lore that surrounds it, I wanted to include it in this video. James Dean was an extremely successful male actor in the 50s and was one of the biggest heartthrobs of the generation. He's critically acclaimed and is potentially one of the best actors to ever play the cool, bad boy roles. Sadly, he was taken far too soon and died in a car accident at the age of 24. The car accident took place in a rural town in California. The accident was a head-on collision that he had in his sports car. This sports car was a silver Porsche 550 Spider, and James Dean affectionately referred to it as his little bastard. This car, although a super cool vehicle, is completely cursed. After Dean died, George Barris, a hot rod designer, purchased what was left of the car with the intention to sell it for parts. When this car was being worked on, it fell and completely crushed the leg of one of the mechanics who was working on it. This is when the potential of a curse started to materialize, but it would grow into so much more. The parts started to get sold and people started to notice a very horrible connection. Anyone who bought parts of this car started to die. The buyer of the engine of the little bastard died shortly after in a fatal car crash. Somebody who bought the tires got in a horrible accident when those same tires just blew out whilst they were on the road. The person who bought the transmission was sent to hospital with critical injuries after getting in a car crash. The truck driver who was moving the car's frame, he got in a horrible accident and he was killed. The amount of death and tragedy that ensued from this car is truly uncanny. The frame of the car that the truck driver was transporting was eventually stolen, and to this day, we don't know where it is. I hope whoever stole it though at least had the foresight not to ever drive with it, because the consequences could be dire. Number 2 on this list is the Basano vase. The Basano vase is a pretty vase that was made all the way back in the 1500s in Napoli, Italy. The vase isn't ornate in nature, it has a very simplistic silver design. It was initially intended as a wedding present, however, it may just have been the worst wedding present that anyone has ever gifted. That's because this vase is a vase of death. Now I know that sounds dramatic, but it truly brings death to whomsoever comes in contact with it. Its initial run-in with death is when it was given as a wedding gift, and that same night as it was gifted, the bride was murdered in her home while she was holding that vase. Some people believe that her spirit haunts this vase now, or that a spirit of death has always had its clutches on this vase. Either way, it didn't stop with just the bride. At the time, the family didn't realize that the vase had anything to do with the misfortune that had befallen the bride, and they continued to pass the vase down generation to generation. However, it seemed that whomever was in possession of this vase would meet an untimely death soon after receiving it. After the family realized what was going on, they boxed the vase up and put a note in it that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." The vase was auctioned off in 1998 though, and the note wasn't included. It sold for $2,250 and it was the worst purchase the buyer ever made. 3 months after buying it, they died. Then 3 more deaths of the following owners were linked to this vase until finally the original family who auctioned it off in the first place demanded that the police take it away. Since then, no one has heard anything from it, which is probably the best thing for everyone. Number 1 on this list is the Crying Boy painting. Once again, stretching the term ancient here a little bit, but it ties into World War II, so I feel like it should be counted. Giovanni Bragolini was a Spanish artist who was famously credited with making a series of paintings of crying children. He made these in the early 1950s, and they were meant to symbolize all of the poor children who became orphans due to the brutal fighting in World War II. His initial market was tourists. However, these paintings, they started to really take off in Europe, and a lot of British families grew fond of them. For years, they were nothing more than just a painting, until in 1985, when the curse of the crying boy hit the mainstream. Ron and Mary lost their home from a kitchen fire. Even though their entire livelihood burned to the ground, the painting of the crying boy that they had, it lived on. It was the one item to survive from the fire. Ron's brother Peter was a fireman, and he said that this wasn't the first time that he saw this. In fact, he believed that he had witnessed the same phenomenon 50 times before. It was then believed that not only were these paintings immune to fire, but the owning of them would inevitably cause a fire in the first place. Mass hysteria ensued, and legends started to come out of everywhere in regards to these paintings. People claimed that it caused their family members to die, or that it was cursed with the soul of the children it depicted. Either way, this reached unparalleled levels, and finally a newspaper, The Sun, said that if people were to ship them their copies of these paintings, they would dispose of them. Over 2,500 copies were sent to this newspaper, and they burned all of them in a massive fire. I don't know if it really was the paintings causing these fires or if they were cursed, but chalking it up to a coincidence seems a little bit too good to be true to me.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Weeping Woman. The Weeping Woman, better known as La Llorona, is a terrifying part of Mexican lore. According to this legend, which varies depending on who's telling it, basically long ago there was a woman named Maria who married a rich man. The couple had 2 lovely children together, but at some point their marriage went downhill and he spent less and less time at home. And when he was home, he would only pay attention to one of his kids. Eventually, Maria found out that her husband was cheating on her. She was then overcome by grief, and one version claims she drowned her 2 children, but then immediately regretted it. So she cried out, "Oh, my children," or "Oh, my sons." In another version, she drowned herself afterwards as well. So she is now banished to purgatory on earth until she finds her lost children. Legend goes on to say that she can be seen floating over bodies of water, crying or weeping as she searches for her lost children, which gave her the name the Weeping Woman. Others believe that she will kidnap and attack other children or cheating husbands. Both pretty terrifying scenarios, and tons of people are afraid of her. Now, the Smithsonian has this terrifying La Llorona doll. Currently though, it's no longer on display, and I wonder why. Apparently, it was freaking too many guests out. On top of that, staff have reported hearing sounds of weeping coming from the doll at night. Could it be that the Weeping Woman is real and has possessed this doll? I don't know, but I think it belongs to the Warrens Museum, not the Smithsonian. Like, I don't think they're trained on how to deal with spirits and other dark entities. In our 4th spot,
spot today, we have the creeping doll. But honestly, it should have been named the creepy doll, because look at this thing. It belongs in a Stephen King horror film. So this doll was one of the first prototypes for a doll that crawls on its own. It was invented in 1871 by a man named George P. Clark. His goal was to make a doll that crawls exactly like how a baby does. And honestly, look how far we've come. Like those Baby Alive, a Baby So Real, like those dolls, scarily accurate. Anyways, so the doll's head, arms, and legs were made out of painted plaster. From there, they were hinged onto a brass clockwork body. The doll then moves forward by rolling along on two toothed wheels. But honestly, it just looks like a creepy robot baby. So not only is this doll terrifying looking, but then it slowly just creeps along. Watch out, this thing will haunt you in your sleep. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me that it's possibly haunted. Staff workers have seen this thing creeping forward on its own. Others have claimed to hear sounds of children laughing or crying near it. Just keep this thing far away from Annabelle, okay? Imagine the damage she could do with those bad boy wheels. In our third spot today, we have the ancient Egyptian treasures. Rumor has it that a number of treasures or artifacts from ancient Egypt are cursed. I mean, you all know about King Tut's curse. Well, there are a couple of items in the Smithsonian from ancient Egypt that are definitely haunted. For starters, we have the scarab. This scarab is believed to be from King Tut's tomb. For starters, it is believed that bad luck will fall on anyone who handles King Tut's body or other artifacts in his tomb. Everything in there is believed to be cursed by King Tut himself. I'm sure you've heard of the story of Howard Carter and his team that excavated the tomb. After doing so, several of the people involved died suddenly and mysteriously, so it's believed that this scarab is cursed along with the other items there. And then we have the mummified cat head. Yeah, you heard me. Now this one actually isn't from King Tut's tomb, but a woman named Mab B. Nylon donated a cat's head. Yeah, just the head. Who knows where the body is? Hey, maybe she kept it for herself and it's on display in her house. I'm not gonna judge. Anyways, this creepy thing is a preserved mummified cat's head wrapped in linen. Inside contains a real cat skull. Well, according to a number of workers, they have seen a ghostly cat apparition move around this display. This damn ghost cat is probably out looking for the rest of its body. This cat has also been seen wandering the halls and in several other exhibits as well. In our second spot, we have Abraham Lincoln's gold watch. That's right, Honest Abe's watch is on display at the Smithsonian. So this watch was purchased in the 1950s from George Chatterton, a jeweler in Springfield, Illinois. And it's a very beautiful pocket watch. In fact, Lincoln's watch is said to have one of the best grade movements in England, and is still apparently in working order. On top of that, that 18-karat case is one of the best quality ones made in the US. What's also cool is that on the inside of the watch, there are inscriptions of people's names. Basically, watchmaker Jonathan Dillon got the watch and was repairing its timepiece. He decided to unscrew the dial and engrave, and I quote, April 13th, 1861. Fort Sumter was attacked by the rebels on the above date. J. Dillon. And he also engraved, "Thank God we have a government." Why? Because at that exact moment he found out that the Confederate forces had fired on Fort Sumter, so he carved it in. And then in 1864, a second watchmaker, L.E. Gross, signed his name. And at another point, someone etched Jeff Davis inside. And Lincoln carried it around without a clue of the inscriptions inside of the watch. Incredible. The watch was actually given to the museum in 1958 by Lincoln Isham, the great-grandson of Abraham Lincoln. And of course, rumor has it that Lincoln likes to haunt his watch. People have seen his ghostly apparition around the area where the watch is being kept. But damn, that must be one big apparition, because Abe was tall as hell, so imagine seeing his ghost. Terrifying. And in our number one spot today, we have Abraham Lincoln's hat, another haunted object from Abe himself. But you heard me correctly, the Smithsonian has a top hat from the one and only Honest Abe. In fact, this is the hat that he was assassinated in. So yeah, no wonder it's haunted. Anyways, even though Abe was super tall, 6'4" tall to be exact, and towered over most people, he decided to wear top hats anyway, because, you know, he's cool like that. This hat he got from J.Y. Davis, a Washington hat maker. In fact, he had the black silk band added to the hat, which represented mourning, in remembrance of his son Willie. Anyways, the last time he put this hat on his head was to go to Ford's Theater in April of 1865. After he was shot shot, the War Department preserved his hat and everything else that was left at Ford's Theater. Of course, they got permission from Mary Lincoln to do so. The department then gave the hat to the Patent Office, and in 1867 it was given to the Smithsonian. But it was immediately put in the basement storage room. Why? Well, the secretary of the Smithsonian thought that there was too much excitement at the time, so the staff had to keep it all hush-hush, and they didn't even reveal that they had the hat until 1893. Now it's one of the museum's most treasured objects, and of course it has the history of being haunted by Abe himself. Apparently a number of people have seen Abe's apparition around the museum, mostly around the hat, but they have claimed to have seen a tall dark figure that looks like Abe in other areas as well. Want to know something kind of freaky but kind of cute? In part 1 of this video I talked about Mary Lincoln's dress that's also at the Smithsonian, and apparently her dress is said to be haunted by Mary herself, meaning the two are together haunting the museum in the afterlife. Oh, kind of sweet, right? Starting off this countdown, we have the haunted Dybbuk box. Dybbuk boxes are known to contain a malicious spirit that can and will possess you. In Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is a malicious spirit that is said to be a disturbed soul of a deceased person. So basically, you don't want to be fooling around with these spirits or boxes. But of course, eBay has many listed for sale on there. Let's take a look at this one particular box. The seller said that he got the box off of an elderly man in South Carolina. In fact, he apparently collects Dybbuk boxes. Anyways, his collection was getting so big that he put it in his crawl space. After doing so, he said it sounded like someone was moving quickly underneath his house. Every day at 3 a.m. he would hear this terrifying noise. Whenever he goes down to check on the box, he feels a cool, heavy air surrounding it. On top of that, his dog often growls at the box and the crawl space. Lastly, he said he heard knocking and children's whispers coming from the box. Due to this reason, he decided to sell the box on eBay. But he was only looking to sell it to an experienced collector, someone that knows how to handle this box and won't just purchase it for fun and then fool around with it. Because the last thing we need is someone buying it as a joke and then the spirit gets out and goes around possessing people. No thank you, 2021 is already bad enough. And in the end, it ended up selling for $39.99. Kind of a steal, not gonna lie. Moving on to number 4, we have the haunted teddy bears. So in part 1, I talked about the haunted dolls that infest eBay. Seriously, there's way too many of them. Well, guess what? Apparently, there's an abundance of haunted bears on eBay as well. Isn't that great? This first bear is apparently haunted by a little blonde boy named Oliver. Oliver likes to move the teddy bear around, so you might set it down in one place and in the morning it could be in a completely different place. The seller even apparently used an Ouija board to contact the spirit possessing the bear. That's when they learned that the boy possessing it was named Oliver and that he is shy, playful, but also scared. Apparently, according to Oliver, he got the bear for his 10th birthday as a gift. But soon his parents were like, whoa, that bear is possessed, we need to get rid of it. Then whatever was possessing the bear originally ended up killing Oliver, and then Oliver got latched onto the bear. What a freaking messed up story. Another haunted bear is this one. It can be bought for only 16 pounds, but it's possessed by a little girl named Sarah. According to the paranormal investigator and collector who once owned this bear, Sarah went missing from an adventure playground one day and was never found. Later, it was discovered that Sarah's mom was using this bear to speak to her dead daughter. The seller of this bear also went on to say that Sarah likes to communicate through EVP, and on a number of occasions she has moved the bear, especially on April 28th, the anniversary of her death. That's when the paranormal activity is most active. In our third spot today, we have the haunted tap shoes. Imagine you're drifting off to sleep when all of a sudden you hear something tapping on the floor beneath you. I'd be terrified and I wouldn't be able to fall back to sleep after that. Well, that's exactly what happened to the person that discovered these haunted tap shoes. According to the seller, the shoes were in a nursery closet in their late aunt's estate. When they first were exploring the estate, they heard knocking coming from inside the closet. They opened it up and boom, that's where the shoes were. They then took them home. First off, why? Second off, why? Anyways, they did, and that's when they heard the shoes tap dancing in the middle of the night. Later, it was revealed that the shoes were haunted by a girl named Lisa. Now, it didn't say how much they sold for, but seriously, unless you're Ed or Lorraine Warren, why would you want to buy any of these haunted items? Especially shoes that are gonna wake you up in the middle of the night when you're just trying to sleep peacefully. In our second spot, we have the memoir box. Right away, you can tell by looking at this image that all of those items are cursed. Like, what are we even looking at? It looks like a serial killer's keepsafe box. Apparently though, it's an old memoir box found inside of an old Victorian home during an estate sale. For some reason, the people touring the estate went up to the attic and came across this box, along with some old children's clothes and scrapbooks. I'ma stop myself right there. So, for starters, they go to an estate sale and they're like, let's not go to the kitchen to check for some fine china. No, let's go to the attic and see what dusty old creepy things they got up there. Like, what? Anyways, and then they found it and decided to take it back with them. A box with other people's hair in it. Yeah, that seems normal. I hope they didn't actually spend money on that. Anyways, the box was filled with random stuff like a tin monkey, locks of hair, small pieces of paper, and some books. On one of the locks of hair, there's a small slip of pink paper that reads, "Died March 14th, 1920, Little Edgar." Even after discovering that, the person still bought this from the estate sale. Now, apparently they had every intention on keeping it, until the box started freaking them out. The seller's dog would just stare randomly at this one corner in their room. It also wouldn't even go near the box at all. So he ended up listing it on eBay for someone else to love. How about we just, let the spirit live in peace, or like, I don't know, donate it to a museum? What do you even do when you have something like that? Just stop buying and selling haunted objects on eBay, honestly. And in our number one spot today, we have the statue. According to this seller, their friend got this statue back in the 1980s. He used to have a job doing brick yard work, and then what he would do was take the unhardened clay, and during his time off, he would sculpt and paint them. Some of the other workers would do the same thing as well. This particular statue was made by a man named William. He claimed that the bust was a self-portrait. Well, sadly, that very day, William was involved in a tragic accident and he got crushed to death. His spirit apparently then latched onto his sculpture. The seller saw his friend's sculpture and decided to take it home with him, preserve the memory of his friend instead of just throwing it out. But that night, he woke up to the sound of someone walking around his house in circles. He checked his home, but no one was there. Later on, other weird things started to happen, like he would hear doors slam shut, only to find no door had actually closed. The scariest thing though is when one night he saw a dark mist moving in his den. He walked in and the room felt heavy and uninviting. Later he realized it was the statue causing all these problems when he noticed his dogs wouldn't go near the statue and refused to even look at it. So that's when he decided to list it up on good old eBay, so someone else's dogs can be spooked by it. So in conclusion, as tempting as it may seem to buy a haunted item off of eBay, maybe don't, just leave it to the professionals to take care of. Starting off this countdown, we have Mary Todd Lincoln's dress. This beautiful dress was once owned by Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife. It's a beautiful purple velvet dress with satin and lace detailing. She wore this dress during the Washington winter social season in 1861 to 62. But here's the thing. After her husband's death, Mary went into mourning for a long period of time. In fact, she stayed in widow's clothes up until her own death in 1882. So she had no use for this dress anymore. So she gave this dress and some of her other items to her family members. This dress was given to her cousin Elizabeth Todd Grimsley. In 1916, Grimsley's son sold the dress to the Smithsonian's First Ladies collection. And now, apparently, it's haunted by Mary Todd herself. People have heard weeping when they have been near this dress. On a number of occasions, they have actually seen Mary Todd Lincoln's apparition by the dress. Thankfully, she means no harm. But if you think about it, it's quite sad. Even in the afterlife, she's still mourning over the loss of her husband. Hopefully, she can eventually find peace and reunite with him. Moving on to number 4, we have the Smithsonian. One of the most haunted items in the Smithsonian is the museum itself. It is haunted by a number of ghosts. As a result, they actually offer ghost tours on location for people interested in the paranormal. On a number of occasions, workers have seen past Smithsonian scientists who would work work on the collections there. But the most active ghost is that of the Smithsonian's first curator and second secretary, Spencer Fullerton Bard. Almost all of the night guards at the Smithsonian have seen his ghost wandering the halls. They see him gliding through the halls, people try to talk to him, and then he disappears into thin air. Then you have the ghost of Secretary Joseph Henry, that also likes to show his face around town. According to the night guards, they said, and I quote, "Henry is often seen fully clothed in the garments he wore in life, walking through the exhibits before returning to his post. His post being the statue the museum has in place for him." Dude, what in the night of the museum is this? Seriously. Then you have the countless unidentified entities that also haunt the halls. These are just like black shadowy figures people have seen in passing. At least it seems like these ghosts mean no harm. Like, sure, it's kinda spooky, but at least they aren't malicious. Also, hit that thumbs up button if you want to see me go ghost hunting at the Smithsonian. I'm down. I'm down. Coming in at number 3, we have the haunted painting. The Smithsonian is home to a number of beautiful, artistic, and haunted paintings. Take this painting for instance. It's called Memorial and was painted by Benton Spruance in 1951. Just by looking at it, it gives me the chills. The painting features a bunch of floating creepy heads or masks with a skull and cross in the background. For starters, why does that one eyeless lady look like the mom from Coraline? Like, I saw the painting and that's immediately what I thought. Unfortunately, not a lot is said about this art piece, but Benton was known for creating pretty dark pieces of work, this being one of them. And according to a number of visitors and staff members, they believe that this painting is haunted. For starters, guests have complained about feeling uneasy near the painting. Workers have experienced the exact same thing. They claim that the painting gives them the creeps. Not only that, but apparently there was also a cold spot around the painting, which was odd because there was no vent or anything nearby. But around the painting, it felt as if someone was blowing cold air directly on the back of their neck and arms. Now, the painting was gifted by a man named John B. Turner, and it makes me wonder, why did he donate it? Did he know it was haunted? Did creepy things happen to him when he was around the painting and that's why he donated it? Who knows, but probably. But who knows? Moving on at number 2, we have the Black Aggie. This all started back in the 1800s when a woman named Marianne Hooper Adams, known by her friends as Clover, sunk into a terrible depression. As a result, she drank some of her photography developing chemicals and took her own life. After her death, her husband commissioned a sculptor to make a memorial statue of her. It was named the Adams Memorial, and later Black Aggie. But because of how it looked, people called it Grief, and that's when this creepy legend surrounding it was born. Legend goes that if you stare into her eyes long enough, they'll open up and start glowing red. Those that see her eyes will either be killed by her or she will cause you to go blind. Not only that, if you sit on the statue's lap at midnight, then you will die within 2 weeks. It's also said that pregnant ladies should never go near her. If they do, she will cause them to miscarry. Of course, this is just a creepy legend, right? Well, supposedly there's real-life stories of this haunted statue taking people's lives. One man put a cigarette out on the statue's hand and he was later found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Another man was found dead at the foot of the statue and no one knows his cause of death. Now, you may be wondering how the statue got to the Smithsonian. Well, because of the legend, a lot of people were breaking into the cemetery at night to visit it, and it was often vandalized. So the family donated it to the museum where it remains to this day. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Hope Diamond. This is a very beautiful diamond from India, but here's the thing. It was stolen from India, and then a curse was placed on it. Back in 1792, the Hope Diamond was part of a Hindu statue. It was one of the idol's eyes. And then somebody went in and took the 115-carat diamond out. Upon discovering that the diamond was stolen, priests put a curse on it. The curse was said to affect anyone that put their greedy little paws on it, which turned out to be a lot of people over the years. And guess what? Bad luck befell to every single one of its owners. It's said that the man who stole the diamond shortly came down with a raging fever and died shortly after. Legend continues on saying that his body was ravaged by wolves. Continuing on, King Louis XIV bought the stone and had it recut in 1673. He died of gangrene, and all his legitimate kids died early on in life. Then we have Marie Antoinette. Apparently she wore it as well. And we all know how bad things ended for her. Another story involved an heiress named Evelyn Walsh McLean. She bought the Hope Diamond and everyone around her started to die mysteriously. First it was her mother-in-law, then her son, then her husband left her and later died in a mental hospital, and then her daughter. She later sold the diamond to get rid of this curse. That's not even half the people affected by this diamond, like the list goes on and on. Now the haunted diamond is on display at the Smithsonian. Hopefully no one will ever try to steal it because we don't need to relive its curse over again.
Number 5. Thomas Busby's chair. Our first entry actually is in a museum, but the curators have deemed it so haunted and dangerous that they have been forced to take special measures to ensure it doesn't unleash its curse on the museum's patrons. The story begins in North Yorkshire in 1702, when two criminals, Daniel Audie and his son-in-law, Thomas Busby, came into conflict. They were coin forgers who essentially ran a criminal empire, but Daniel disapproved of Tom's relationship with his daughter. This resulted in a fight, which ended with Daniel's untimely demise. Thomas was arrested soon afterwards and sentenced to be hung. There is some variation in what happened next. Some versions of the tale say that Thomas was arrested at his favorite pub, and others say he was allowed back into the bar for his last meal before his death. Whatever the case, before being taken away, he told the other patrons of the pub, "May sudden death come to anyone who dare sit in my chair." He was then taken away and hung across the street. As the local historian and poet William Grange described it, the bones of the poor wretch who had committed murder were hung to fester in the sunshine and blow in the tempest, until they fell piecemeal to earth, and tradition yet tells tales of night wanderers being terrified when passing this dreaded spot. While Thomas began apparently haunting the spot across from the inn where his remains were displayed, the curse he laid on the chair began taking effect. Over the years, many brave souls sat on the chair to prove that they were not afraid and paid the price. In 1894, a chimney sweep sat in the chair and was found the next day hanging next to where Busby had been displayed. In 1967, two Air Force pilots sat in the chair as a joke, but when they were driving home that night, they crashed into a tree and did not survive. A few years later, a builder sat in the chair and fell off of a roof later that same night. Not long after, a cleaner fell into the chair after slipping while mopping the floor and died of a brain tumor soon afterwards. In 1978, the owner of the now renamed Busby Stoop Inn decided that too many deaths had occurred and donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum. Although they didn't technically lock the chair away, they did hang the chair on a wall, 5 feet off of the ground, to prevent anyone from sitting on it and receiving Busby's fatal curse. Number 4. The Hanging Man Painting. This haunted painting is actually linked to a haunted photograph, making it twice as haunted as most objects on this list. It all started when a photographer named James Kidd took a seemingly innocuous photo of a wooden cart next to a barn. Kidd thought nothing of it until he had the photo developed and saw that a ghostly figure had made its way into the frame. On the left side of the cart, he could see a headless and hanging man. He showed the photos to others who searched for any sign of doctoring, but could find none. It was then that this photo caught the attention of a painter named Laura P. Laura claims that she felt drawn to the image and decided that she had to make an oil painting based on the photograph. While painting the picture, she reported feeling deeply uneasy, but pushed through to finish her art. The painting was hung at a local business, but was soon taken down after it reportedly began moving on its own and caused several important papers to go missing. Laura then put the painting up in her own home, but soon began to experience strange occurrences. These included objects being knocked over or broken, mysterious knocking on the doors, strange leaks, and perhaps most disturbing, the apparition of the headless man in her home. Once word of the haunted painting got out, she received several offers from collectors to buy the painting, but she has so far refused, claiming that she is afraid of what the painting could do in the homes of others. Number 3. The Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is a coded book that was believed to have been written at some point in the early 15th century. It was discovered in a locked chest in Rome in the year 1912, and deciphering its history, and more importantly its meaning, has been the goal of several different scholars for many years before and since. Its first known owner was believed to be Rudolph II. Rudolph apparently thought that the mysterious book had been written by Roger Bacon, and purchased the book for a huge sum of money. roughly 600 ducats of gold. The first 100% confirmed owner of the text was an alchemist named George Barish, who found the mysterious book in his personal library, unsure of its origin. It was passed from him to a variety of scholars, emperors, and officials, all of whom failed to decipher its bizarre text and illustrations. Several of the world's best cryptographers from the First and Second World War have tried to decipher its 240 pages, and have not found any way to read the book. Some of the pictures include detailed sketches of plants that are not found in nature, and zodiac signs. As you might expect, there are several theories about the purpose and author of this book, with some believing that it was a herbology text written in a lost shorthand, and others having more outlandish theories that it was created by aliens from another world. One theory is that the book was written by either a demon or the devil himself, and that anyone who manages to translate its contents will unleash a curse upon the world. A theory they believe is bolstered by the fact that several people who have attempted a translation have gone on to suffer several years of bad fortune. Whether the origin of this book is human or demonic in nature, it is still the most mysterious and curiosity-inducing books in human history. Number 2. The Anguished Man. The tale of this rather disturbing-looking painting is strange and steeped in mystery, but every scant piece of information we have on it is more unsettling than the last. The painting of a featureless man who seems to be screaming was apparently painted by a deeply troubled artist who mixed his own blood with his paints in an effort to get the right shade of red. Not long after completing it, the artist took his own life, and the painting found its way into a woman's care. She kept it for many years, but claimed that once she put the painting up, her and her family began to see a dark, shadowy figure roaming about her house. At night, they would hear strange sounds like footsteps and crying. The woman took the painting down and kept it in her attic for 25 years until she died, leaving the painting to its current caretaker, Sean Robinson. Sean had been warned by his grandmother that the painting was haunted, but he thought little of it. Robinson kept the painting in his basement for about a decade, before rediscovering it and putting it up. Once again, the family began seeing the dark, shadowy figure roaming the halls and hearing the sound of weeping and moaning during the night. Sean began leaving a camera on by the painting to try and get evidence of its paranormal nature, and upon reviewing the footage, heard some odd noises and saw evidence of doors opening and closing, seemingly by themselves, and the painting falling over onto the ground. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense, with his wife seeing a strange mist and an unseen force pushing his son down the stairs. Things went from bad to worse when guests who came to see the painting began reporting intense and sudden nosebleeds. Sean takes the painting out from time to time to show it to paranormal investigators in television programs who want to hear his story. But otherwise, the Anguished Man is apparently kept locked away in a safe location to prevent any further harm from coming to unwitting people. Number 1. The Basano vase. Although it has fallen out of favor now, for centuries, a common gift given to brides on the day of their weddings were intricate, ornate vases. Our next tale begins in the 15th century in Italy and spans over 500 years. Legend says that on the day of her wedding, a bride in a village near Napoli found a gift, with no clue which of the guests had given it to her. It was a 4-pound silver vase. She decided to put it in her room for safekeeping before the wedding ceremony. But when the ceremony was due to start, the bride was nowhere to be found. The groom went to her room to look for her, and found her lifeless body on the ground, with no trace of what had caused the death, other than her desperately clutching the silver vase. The bride was buried, and the vase was passed on to one of her family members to be taken care of. Within days, the second member of the family was dead from unknown causes. The vase was given to another member of the family, and when he also passed away, the family made the connection between all the recent tragedies and the Basano vase. Unsure of what to do, they reached out to a local priest, who upon hearing the story, informed them that whoever had given it to the bride had either cursed it or made it from cursed materials. He advised them to bury it on sacred ground. They dug a hole and wrote a note, warning, "Beware, this vase brings death. which they placed in the cursed vase. The vase was buried and remained underground for the next 500 years. By horrible chance, a man in 1988 was digging and came across the vase. He read the note, but being the skeptical type, discarded it and took the newly found Basano vase to a local auction house. The vase went up for auction and was sold for the equivalent of $2,270 to a local pharmacist. Within 3 months, the pharmacist was dead, and the vase was sold by his family to a local doctor, who also passed away soon after. The vase developed a reputation after this, and several people who were approached to purchase it refused. But it was eventually bought by an archaeologist who, despite his family's protests, did not believe in curses. He died 3 months later. His family threw the vase out their window, but a police officer who was passing by saw this and tried to return it. The family refused the vase back and told him of its cursed nature. He tried to give it to multiple different museums, but having heard about the curse, they all refused. Fearing for his life, he did what the bride's family had done over 500 years prior and buried it in a lead box in a cemetery. Which cemetery he used is unknown, but let us hope that no unwitting soul rediscovers this cursed vase and unleashes it upon humanity once again. When looking through antique stores or discovering buried items with mysterious notes in them, try to be careful not to inadvertently unleash a curse on you and your family. And if you think you found a haunted item that you could possibly make some money off of, resist the urge to sell it to a museum, and instead remember, some things are best kept locked away. While I remain cursed to stay in this liminal void, hosting videos of a frightening nature, you can ward off such a fate by remembering to like and comment on this video and to subscribe to our channel. Hopefully I will see you again soon, and I can regale you with more tales of the macabre and the disturbing here on Top 5 Scary Videos.